so I'm a
Awesome.
big radio fan.
Awesome.
Nice. So this isn't
Good
new
to
for
hear.
you then.
Not at all.
Excellent, excellent. Let me just check the levels real quick and make sure everything sounds good.
Okay. And can you tell me a little bit more about yourself and the premise of your radio show?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Our radio show is called Third Eye Weekly.
Hmm.
And the whole radio station covers mainly independent news and independent media, independent music. We really focus on the independent news. We kind of interview three different people on each podcast underneath our theme that maybe have been underrepresented in the mainstream media. So we
Hmm.
try and cover the stories that kind of get slipped through the cracks in mainstream media and compile it all together under one theme every week. And it's called Third Eye Weekly.
So yeah, the theme for this week is Millennial Week, which is why we thought it would be great to talk with you.
Nice. And how did you hear about us?
I actually read an article in the, I believe it was the Wall Street Journal that talked about millennial participation, and I thought it was really well written, and there was some great quotes from you and from the organization, so I thought, why not reach out?
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. And what made you guys start? Did you guys start Breakthrough Radio?
We didn't. It's been around for about 10 years now, and
Oh,
the podcast Third Eye Weekly has been around for, I want to say, 2 or 3 years. We recently inherited it from an editor who left, so it's kind of our child now,
Yes,
so to
we've
speak.
totally reformatted it now that we've inherited it. So yeah, it's our little baby, and we're trying to make it grow and make it better.
that's exciting. And that's what you guys do full time? You do this radio show?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a couple other podcasts that we each do as well. I do a film review and a music discovery one, and Lisa does.
The Daily Beat, which I'm also reformatting, but it basically covers events in New York City, sometimes politically aimed and sometimes not. And I kind of slice it up into 15-minute segments
Mhm.
every day throughout the week under one umbrella story. So kind of like get the youth to really listen to things like very straightforward, like this is what's going on with like the affordable housing crisis, like boom, 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 15 minutes every day. So that's what I'm kind of working on now.
Nice, nice. That's exciting. Well, I'm happy to be on and excited for the interview.
Yeah, it's a
Great.
pleasure to have you. I guess we'll jump right into it if you're all ready.
Sure.
Cool.
And where should what's the best place to look?
That's, I'm kind of trying to figure that out myself right now. This is the whole video compartment of the podcast is something new that our boss wanted us to try and incorporate. So, I guess just as long as you're looking at the computer, it's going to be totally cool. I'm trying to look at the eye of the camera on my computer just so it looks like I'm maintaining eye contact with you in the video, although,
Okay.
it doesn't really matter, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Okay. I'll kind of look at you and then kind of look at the eye of the camera.
Sure. Yeah, that's what we're doing, so.
That's
All right. Cool.
Welcome back to Third Eye Weekly. We're here with the Millennial Action Project President, Stephen Alacara. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. So for those in our audience that don't know already, tell us a little bit about the Millennial Action Project. What do you guys do? What is your vision?
Well, the goal of the Millennial Action Project is to counteract the historic levels of polarization, gridlock, and dysfunction that we're seeing in the political system. We believe the solution lies in the millennial generation, and our goal is to transform the governing culture in our country towards cooperation and make sure that our generation is at the forefront of those changes. So among the things that we've done is create the first youth-led caucus in Congress called the Bipartisan Congressional Future Caucus, and it's co-chaired by two of the youngest members of Congress. And this is a paradigm shift in that the youngest members of Congress, the rising stars in American politics, who are of millennial aged, are leading the way in forging bipartisan solutions and working across the aisle. And that's not what you're seeing much of today if you follow the national news, but if you follow the work that we're doing, it's very inspiring and gives you a lot of hope for the future of our generation and the future of our country.
great. So what characteristics about our millennial generation do you feel could remedy this political dysfunction going on?
Well, the most important thing is that we're the most politically independent generation in the country. Plurality of us, 50% of millennials identify as independent, and party affiliation is dropping extremely fast, and our skepticism, I think, in institutions is a healthy skepticism because, frankly, they've failed our generation. The problems that we'll inherit from climate change to the national debt are grossly irresponsible, and we will have to deal with them in the future. But I'm very optimistic about our ability to do that. Second is our nature of collaboration. We're collaborating now on projects, our generation is, with people all around the world. And now with some of the new technologies we have, often we're collaborating in real time. So those are the types of values that are sorely needed right now in our political institutions. The third reason I would mention is, look at how our generation has already disrupted technology and communications and so many other industries. It's our belief that the next area for disruption is politics itself. Last year, Gallup found that the #1 issue for voters was not the economy, but in fact was a lack of leadership from government officials and political conflict. So if that is truly one of the most pressing issues of our time, then we need our generation's best and brightest entrepreneurs and innovators moving into this space and becoming political entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. And speaking to being an entrepreneur and to what is really at stake for the millennial generation, our generation, we have a lot of great promise to revitalize some of these stagnant politics with innovative new approaches and mindsets, but there's also a big stake to lose as a result of the whole debilitated political process. So how do you think millennials should go about treading the balance between the two, between such a great stake that we have in between these innovative new approaches?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say a couple things. One is, already we've seen an explosion of social entrepreneurship. Our generation's leading innovative solutions in education, healthcare, in building smart cities, and I think those are all extremely important. But at the same time, public policy governs our lives, and if you truly want to go about solving a problem or scaling an innovative solution that you've found, then the thing you've got to do, whether kind of you like it or not, is engage in the political process and ultimately change public policy. So that's what we're trying to say to the so many change makers we have in our generation, is that public policy has to be a part of your life. And the other thing I'd say is, this is not unprecedented for young people to change their country. In fact, the greatest political innovators in our nation's history have been those of millennial age, whether today we're celebrating Dr. King's Day as a national holiday. Dr. King led the Montgomery bus boycott when he was 26 years old. He delivered I Have a Dream when he was 34 years old. So with those ages, he would be, the youngest member of Congress. I mean, the members of our future caucus are in that, 30 to 40 age range. The founders themselves were of millennial age when they started our country. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence when he was 33. James Madison was 29 when he was first elected to the Second Continental Congress, becomes our nation's chief architect of the Constitution. So there's a historical precedent for a generation like ours to lead with these innovative solutions, not just in the private sector, but really in the public square as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned, the Bipartisan Congressional Future Caucus. What are some other ways you guys are helping to promote millennial leadership?
Mm-hmm. Well, in addition to our work in Congress, which has made a ton of progress in producing bipartisan legislation, also we're engaged in the states and in cities, because the rising stars in American politics are in Congress, but really over the next 5 to 10 years, they will be coming from the state level. They will, so the leaders that we work with in states like Colorado, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Hawaii, where they've formed their own state-level future caucuses in building political cooperation, they very likely would be in Congress in the next 5 to 10 years, defining the political debates and political culture in our country. So in each of those states, we'll have elected leaders, community leaders. They'll have a local advisory board. They'll speak with the local students. They'll go to schools, and because for a lot of kids, it's one thing to learn about government in the textbook. It's another thing to find a 24-year-old mayor who's actually going about making change in his community. So those are the sorts of things that we do at the local level. There's a whole generation of millennial mayors who are pragmatically solving problems and utilizing technology to improve their government.
Absolutely. So how do you get groups of millennials that are so disenchanted with the political system that they believe has failed them to participate in that very same system and to reform it for the better?
Well, it's a really good question, and I think it's logical that many millennials are disaffected by the process. So it's not surprising to see disengagement, especially in non-presidential years. So in this last midterm election, the millennial vote was at about 13% of the electorate. About 20 or so percent of our generation actually voted in the midterm. It's normally about twice that amount for presidential elections. The thing we have to do to change that is to create real examples of impact in the political process, and that's what we're trying to do with the Millennial Action Project. Because if you're not producing impact through a particular arena of change, then it's natural that you would go look somewhere else. And today, you see many people entering the nonprofit and private sectors trying to move markets in ways that are socially or environmentally responsible, which again is all great work. So I think once millennials start to see the public policy arena as an area ripe for making change that they care about, you'll definitely start to see them become more engaged. And as well with voting, the political process in government just simply has to update itself to the 21st century to be more accessible to millennials. And there are lots of great startups working on these sort of things, making legislation more available on your phone or through online, giving you real-time avenues for commenting on legislation, even drafting legislation. There's a group called the OpenGov Foundation that has created a new app for you to kind of co-create legislation with people. There's another group application called PopVox, which basically is an online portal to legislators' constituents to hear what they think about legislation. I would love to see online voting someday. It's kind of a task to find out where you vote and what it takes to go to your local clerk's office. But but all these processes have to also be updated. Again, we'd make the case people most likely to update those processes are the millennial generation.
What do you see as the greatest obstacle for some of these millennials to participate in public policy with all these incumbents and career politicians being there for years? How do they gain a following and are able to beat some of these other politicians?
Well, it's a substantial problem. The session of Congress from 2009 to 2010, right after Obama was elected, was in fact the oldest Congress in United States history. The last couple of sessions have also been among the most aged Congresses that we've seen. So the main obstacles are financial, and I think which is related to incumbent advantage. And it's my opinion that the technology is democratized running for office in many ways. There are a lot of new solutions out there that help you get your campaign started with minimal funds, that help you amplify your message through social media and other ways on with minimal funding, but still the cost of running elections, despite that, has actually increased exponentially. So we talk to millennials who've run for office and tell us stories about getting a second mortgage, making significant family sacrifices in order to run for office, and it's inspiring, but it shouldn't have to be that way. So I think one of the things that our generation has to rally around is money in politics reform, in a bipartisan way, to lower the barriers to entry financially. I mean, intellectually, I think the barriers should still be high. We want the best people getting in, but you shouldn't have to be a millionaire or billionaire to run for office.
I think more and more millennials are beginning to identify themselves as independent in a predominantly two-party system. How do we accommodate for this?
The most common line I think you hear from millennials and their views on politics is not that I'm a Democrat or that I'm a Republican. It's that I'm more socially progressive but fiscally conservative. We don't believe in big government answers for everything. We, in fact, would like to see more entrepreneurial, network-driven type solutions on a whole range of issues. And, of course, we're more socially progressive on issues like gay marriage and marijuana. And that's always been the case in our nation's history, that the young people are on the cutting edge of these social issues. So which political party represents that today? Really, neither does. You don't see one. In some way, maybe you see some of the flanks of particular parties, like on the Democratic side, Cory Booker engages a lot of young people. On the Republican side, Rand Paul, libertarian, engages a lot of young people on the Republican side. But still, you feel like you're making a lot of ideological sacrifices when you vote for either of these parties, and I think it shouldn't have to be that way. There should be enough space in our politics for everyone, and if you don't see that, then you ought to organize or maybe even run for office yourself. But what we're trying to do with Millennial Action Project is create a diversity of opinions that are respected in Congress and in state legislatures, and create a collaborative environment for them to come up with the best solutions.
So what are the plans for 2015 with the Millennial Action Project?
Well, two of our biggest goals right now is build the congressional caucus to include the new members just elected in 2014, and take on really more strategic long-term issues. 2014 was a year where we proved that the model works, that our foundation and the caucuses building that are extremely strong, and so this year it's time to take on with that momentum larger and more difficult issues. So we're starting an effort around money in politics reform, climate reform, and other areas where we're building the foundations for bipartisan or post-partisan consensus. The second thing is trying to turn our national discourse on its head, because right now our public policy issues are framed by people who've been groomed by the parties and groomed to have partisan viewpoints, and that just turns off a lot of people. So we want to affect the national dialogue and build a narrative really around cooperation and things that are working. And to your earlier question, Zach, I think we'll start to see more millennials get engaged if you see a more productive debate happening at the national level. So those are two areas that we're particularly focused on. And then another goal for us is also to start 4 more state caucuses. So you'll see new ones in California, Texas, Florida, Georgia, and a few other states this year.
Excellent. Well, I know we can't wait to see an increased millennial involvement. That's all the time we have, Stephen. Thank you so much for talking with us today.
Thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure. We'll be sure to send you the links to all this when it goes live later.
Okay. Great. And how do you kind of cultivate your audience, and how big is it approximately?
For the website in total is a figure we have. We have about 2.3 million people visiting monthly. And mainly it's people under the age of 30.
Nice.
And for this particular podcast, we have approximately 100,000 weekly audience.
Very cool.
Mhm.
Excellent.
Great.
Well, it's a pleasure to talk with all of you. Hopefully that was interesting.
Yeah.
And
Certainly was.
Definitely.
excellent. Look forward to staying in touch.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too. Bye.